All right, guys. So I had a request to make a video about what settings I use for hunting relics on the Nokta Triple score. So let's just fire it up and I'll go through it. This is running the current update. I got sensitivity all cut back and I turned the backlight on so y'all can see it a little better, hopefully. But so out here on this screen, my sensitivity is anywhere from 10, usually up to 13. Once you get over 12, this detector really punches deep anyway. 14 and 15, I know some people get up there that high with it. I haven't found a need to do that, especially after I had a buddy of mine point out that I just don't need to run it that high. I was getting all kinds of feedback on the sight, and the iron was squirrely in that sight using this big coil. I didn't have the small coil on at the time. He asked me what my sensitivity was. I told him, and then he set me straight. Rookie mistake right there. But anyway, sensitivity 10 to 13, depending on ground conditions. Dense iron where things aren't deep, 10 works great. Getting off into more open ground, I bump it up. I use park mode, and I use M2. This machine has 3 multis and 3 singles. Multi 1's lower weighted. It's going to be good for, kind of like your coin shooting, things like that. But if you get off into iron, you're going to be at a disadvantage using multi 1. So I'll stick with multi 2. It's plenty deep on a small silver coin, or a big silver coin, and then, low conductors like pewter buttons and things like that. It's plenty deep in multi 2. I will use multi 3 because I've had a couple areas in wet soil, and there's one other soil type in my area that does give multi 2 fits, seems like. And in those situations, multi 3 has done me well. But for the sake of this video, multi 2 mostly all the time, and park. Field is a good mode. It works well. It's deep. It separates good. It says in the manual that it has another algorithm in place for identifying non-ferrous at depth, perhaps, something to that nature. I think that's what it says. But I did use field for a while on this machine. I've used it quite a bit. But overall, I prefer park, M2, discrimination pattern of ground, because I like to hear my iron. And I never run any kind of notch or anything like that. It's always at ground, pretty much wide open, sensitivity 10 to 13, and we'll get into the settings here and go through them. So I don't really ground balance here because the ground is so neutral in my area that it's not really required, and I don't think you really need to ground balance these multi-frequency detectors. It's not something you have to worry about like you did with the older stuff. Not saying that there's not spots where you do need to ground balance. And of course, you need to noise cancel it and all that. I always do a noise cancel as soon as I fire it up. It's the first thing I do. Once you get your mode set to the frequency that you want, you noise cancel it. All right. Recovery. Goes from 1 to 5 on this machine. The detector's fast in all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it is pretty darn quick at 5. I don't know how it stacks up against like the Deus 2, for example, because I feel like the Deus 2 might be a hair quicker when I run it at a high reactivity speed or recovery speed, whatever you want to call it. So the stock setting is 3, and that's fine. It's plenty deep at 3, and it's plenty quick at 3. It's a great middle of the road setting. Used it for many hours, never had an issue. Started going down to 2 in the woods and in open fields, and still super deep at 2. I feel like depth really starts to drop noticeably after 3. So 4 and 5 do have a noticeable loss in depth, which is how recovery speed works. I use 5 quite a bit. I just, if I'm in 3 hunting in the iron, because I usually will start out in 3, but if it gives me too much of a fit, I'll bump it up to 5. And I have dug plenty of deep non-ferrous targets, small targets at 6, 7, 8 inches with a 5 recovery. So I'm not afraid to run it at 5. In fact, it's pretty enjoyable in the iron to run it at 5. And when it's super thick iron, you're not punching that deep anyway. No detector does it. It gets blinded by the iron after 7, 8 inches anyway. So iron filter. This one's important when you're relic hunting like a home site or an iron patch. I've never ran it higher than 4 during a hunt. And that's in dense colonial hand-forged rosehead nails. I have used 4 just to see how it would affect the falsing that this detector will tend to do. Now, it's not bad. We all know that the Deus will do the 7, 8, 9 thing you've heard people talk about. On this detector, it's 33. It will, when it falses on a nail head, it will go to 33 on the ID. I'll get more to that in a second. So 4 for a tough area. Sure, I did a test on a live dig in one of my videos where I had this jacked all the way up as well as bottle cap reject all the way up, and I was still hitting a non-ferrous target that sounded deep at a recovery of 5. And I went to dig it, dug it live, and it turned out to be a really deep 1812 button. So it can still unmask. You are losing its ability once you raise this and bottle cap reject and raise the recovery, gains you some back. But I always run this right here or down to here. This can get frustrating in the right type of iron. It will start to get a little chatty. Then you can use your sensitivity to kind of balance it. You know how deep stuff's trying to be. It's a little bit of a trade-off there. But generally, I just leave it at 3. It's done me fine. It's actually really impressed me. That's your volume, that's your backlight, that's your Bluetooth, that's your stabilizer. I never mess with stabilizer. Never have. Don't find a reason to do it. I think it even says in the manual that it should be left at 0 unless absolutely needed. Here's your user profile. This is notch. I don't want to use notch at all. Let's see. All right, tone selection. This is important. I use 2 settings on this detector no matter what scenario I'm hunting. 60 or pitch. So if I'm in the woods and not hunting iron, or even if I am hunting iron in the woods and I know that there's not modern trash mixed in, I'm running pitch because I want to dig every non-ferrous target that comes in above a nail. And pitch is good for those nails that like to spit up to 33. That's where I was getting with that. You get some difficult nails that will throw a 33 ID on this machine, and if you can rotate 30 to 60 degrees and still get a repeatable target with iron audio and that ID coming up in the non-ferrous range, just go ahead and dig it. Sometimes it is a nail, but a lot of times it's turned out to be buttons, little musket balls, and things like that. And one of the disadvantages of it going to 33 like that, which to me in my mind is the equivalent of the 789 issue on the Deus, because when I've had that happen to me on the Deus, I use that same technique of rotation, and I still pulled non-ferrous targets out that were throwing 789 ID, but were giving me an audio that was sketchy but diggable. Pitch will do you good in that situation in the thick iron, and I like it for that. Now 60, I use 60 anywhere where there's anything modern, or if I'm trying to go for a certain type of target. But I've got one site in particular. It's a 17, probably 60s to 80s, maybe touching 1800 home site, and it's been under a modern campground since about the late 40s to current. And the amount of modern trash mixed in with that colonial stuff is mind-numbing. I've been hunting that site for over 3 years, and there's so many targets left that I've had to really hone in, depending on what detector I'm using for the day. Really had to hone in my ear to what I'm looking for as far as sound of depth, like the modulation on the tone. ID really doesn't matter unless, I'm listening for a certain sound. And on this machine, you're going to want to dig the numbers that come in below pull tab range. So low 20s is your like gold range on this machine. Pull tabs are usually 26 to 28, somewhere in there. And then the 30s is where it starts getting good. You can get a ring pull beaver tail pull tab will come in about a 34. But so do flat buttons. And so do musket balls and mini balls. Most buttons come into that mid to low 30s range. So that kind of ties back into the iron falsing up into the 30s. You need to be digging those targets if they repeat. And if it's a nail, so be it. It's just the way the hobby is. When we relic hunt, we're going to dig stubborn nails. I do it with the Deus. I do it with triple score. I've done it with all my other machines in the past. Now, some are better than others, and I would consider this one to be on the better end of it, as well as the Deus and a couple other machines that I've had recently. But that's what I do for tones, 60 or pitch. Iron audio, I leave it at 4. Sometimes I will run it up if there's a lot of background noise, but I love to hear the iron audio. To me, it's important. Some guys have been cutting it out here in the discrimination pattern. They've been cutting the iron audio out, and they're getting a better, more repeatable tone. Yeah, maybe, but what if you're catching that nail head just right and you can't hear the iron audio now, but you're getting a repeatable tone? At least if I'm going, I don't want to get my feelings hurt with the iron audio off thinking I got a clear, pure tone. And it will crackle and pop on some stuff. Yeah, I get it. But if you have the iron audio totally off and you hit that nail just right, you're going to be like, man, there's something good there. And you go to dig it and you're going to get a nail. I'd rather hear the iron audio and be anticipating the nail and then not get a nail. That's the way I'm looking at it. Tone break, don't ever mess with it. This is threshold. I don't ever mess with that. Bottle cap reject, don't really need it. The bottle cap, the way this thing handles bottle caps is great. You can usually tell it's going to be a trash target. Hardly ever do they ring in clear for me. Vibrate and flashlight. All right, so that's pretty much it. This is a really easy detector to set up. It sets up very quick, and the settings that you put in it stay in it. So, yeah, I like it. I mean, I don't even have multiple user profiles set up on this thing because it's really quick to just go through and make the changes that you want. It's really not that much different than just going to the user profile icon and cycling through them. Especially if you had more than one or two. Getting from those would take you just about as long as going to whatever setting you're messing with and changing it. So I like this detector. It's been really fun to use. I got no plans of getting rid of it. To me, it was money well spent, and it does perform pretty well. It's impressed me a few times now. So that's about it. Thanks for watching.